Welcome to 2022. Seems like we were just in 2019. This is the Community Consolidated School District Board of Education meeting for January 12th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. First part of business tonight is a public hearing. This is a conduct a public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Education to sell $9.1 million in working cash fund bonds for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund. So I need a call to order and a roll call, please.
Weedman.
Here.
Mack.
Here.
Braden.
Here.
Albert.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
And Nash.
Here.
Okay, that gives us a quorum. Next, we need to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Next we have a presentation from Chris.
Okay, this is the public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Education to sell $9.1 million of working cash fund bonds for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund. At the December 8th, 2022 regular board meeting, the board bravely and courageously approved a 3-year capital plan, aligning improvements at all the district's buildings, including roof replacements, paving, HVAC, and air ventilation projects. To finance these investments, we have the option to extend taxes for bonds which were issued without referendum at a level called the Debt Service Extension Pace, or DSEP. Using our DSEP to issue working cash bonds will enable us to immediately begin the work of planning for these projects. The administration is recommending to the Board of Education this option as it maximizes the bond proceeds available to the district and aligns the capital work with the life of the bonds. So a quick reminder about what we've done. On December 8th, the board approved the resolution of intent to issue bonds. A notice of the public hearing was published in the Daily Herald on December 13th. A notice of the public hearing was posted at the district office and on the district's website with the board agenda on January 10th. We received no petitions regarding this issuance, which closes today. Moving forward, we will begin the bond rating process, in which several board members will be involved. We expect to receive our bond rating on January 31st, and at the February 16th board meeting, approve parameters bond resolution authorizing the sale of the bonds. We expect the market price for the bonds on February 22nd, and the bond proceeds to be received on March 16th. Do I have any questions about the schedule, timetable, or the process moving forward?
Anybody from the board have any questions for Chris?
Do you want questions just specific to the timetable right now, or can I ask, do you want to do your presentation first, or no?
I'll take any question from you.
Okay, all right. You know what, I'm gonna go wait. I'm gonna wait.
The presentation is done. I've outlined the
Sorry,
timetable.
okay, all right, thank you. My question is, in the memo that we got you, in the last line, I wanted a little clarification. If you could just walk us through the following statement. It says the taxable and tax-exempt refunding components of the financing plan, it will not incur a tax increase for our taxpayers. Is that? And then the second part was that the net interest cost savings is based on current estimates. Can you walk us through, just in layman's terms,
Sure.
what that means?
There's a very long answer that an underwriter would be able to walk you through, but I'm going to try and answer it as best as I can. So the issue of the non-referendum bonds, when combined with refunding, will not increase the taxes for the debt service. This is because the small increase from the non-referendum bonds is offset from the savings from the refunding. In the long term, if we were issuing this bond without a refunding, it would cost $53 on an assessed value in taxes of $250,000. But because we're doing this now, combined with the refunding of our present debt, it will not cost anything for the life of those bonds. Does that, hopefully that answers the question without an underwriter, which is a very long answer about refunding 2012 bonds going out in August, it's a little bit more difficult for me to answer that, but that's the crux of the answer.
And thank you. That was what I wanted, was just the crux of it, so thank you.
The 2.53 is an estimate of today. So that is with I believe a 75 basis point cushion. So I hope that we will do better than that based on current market rates.
Okay, great. And then my second question is that Raymond James, we talked before, they agreed to monitor the secondary market for us, specifically around flipping the bonds. What's the follow-up for that, if you know yet?
I can tell you that the bonds cannot be sold until the district approves the bond resolution. Bond resolution is a regular meeting scheduled for February 16th. So they will monitor them, but we can't do anything about that until they're sold. So they will be monitored, and we have passed on your concerns to our underwriters.
Fantastic, but we'll have that information going into future decisions. Is that, like, we can learn from this and then go so that we know more about the secondary bond market for any kind of future considerations that we need to make?
We could definitely bring our underwriter back to talk to you about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay. We just need to do a little bit of housekeeping here, because evidently we missed something here. So I need a motion to approve the agenda for the public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second.
Miller,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
Okay, our next is public questions or comments for the public hearing itself, not for the next board meeting that is immediately following. Has anybody signed up? No? Okay. What topic are you looking to speak on? Okay, so let's save that for the following meeting. And if you can come up and put your name and information on the signing sheet up here. And once we go into the public comment of the next meeting, which is in a matter of seconds, we'll get you in. Okay? Okay, so being no comments, public comments on the public hearing, I need a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye?
and Braden.
Aye.
Okay. So now we will go into the regular Board of Education meeting. So I need a call to order and a roll call for that.
Weedman,
Aye?
Mack,
Here?
Aye.
Braden,
Here.
Albert,
Here.
LaCroy,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
and Nash.
Present.
Okay, and since nobody took off running, we still have a quorum. I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda for the regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Miller,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye?
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we are back up to public comments. So if you'd like to come up and take the podium, I think you're the only one at this point.
Hi. So I'll keep this very short and sweet. There's no issue. Don't worry. So I know Alice's law, the videos that have to be shown every
Can I just
year.
ask you to introduce yourself,
Oh my
please?
gosh, yes. Please finish.
Go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
Okay, my name's Michelle Cunny.
Okay?
So I know those videos were shown, and they're completely appropriate. I agree with them. However, I know that my husband and I were not alerted ahead of time. We didn't receive the emails that were sent out on the 11th, right after Christmas break started. And it just feels like, kind of like, I know it's a slip through the cracks. We both didn't get them. And, so it's just something I would have liked to have been alerted to. So I just wanted to possibly suggest something instead of opt out. Can people maybe opt in for anything further sexual education-wise? Possibly. I just wanted to suggest that.
Okay,
Really, that's it. So, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate your time. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
No other public comments? Okay. Next is board reports, if I can start off with that. The end of the year, we lost a former board member, Tom Meskel. Sadly, it was only 8 weeks or so from the passing of his wife, Mary. So both of them have passed away recently. Tom was on the board for a 4-year period, and he was also a member of the Foundation 46, which is the not-for-profit educational support program that we have in town. He was very active in education. He was a teacher for many years down in Niles, I believe it was, Niles East. He also taught out in Ohio. Yes. Iowa. That's what I had right. Iowa. Tom will be missed. His stories will be missed. His little off-color jokes will be missed. And I just wanted to pass that on to the community that we lost Tom Meskel recently. One other thing I wanted to talk about, or wanted to state real quick, was wanted to thank the staff for their work over the winter break with the constantly changing CDC guidelines and IDPH guidelines, and keeping track of everything that's being changed and communicating that out to the families and to the community, and keeping the board apprised of what has been changing and what is needed to be done. I wanted to thank them for that work and to keeping our kids into school as best we can at this point. So I just wanted to pass along that thanks.
So I also wanted to offer condolences to the family. I know Tom Meskel also served our country in the Navy, and that was something I'm personally very grateful for. And then also a couple thank yous. First to the Equity Committee, I attended a focus group this week, as I'm sure many of us did, and it was not long before I got a text just from one person saying thank you for hosting this, and so thank you again to the Equity Committee for making those conversations possible. And then also, Adam, if you could pass on the thank you to the custodial staff. As I was going through the financial reports, I'm looking at overtime, and I'm going, oh my gosh, these guys are putting in a ton of work. So thank you for that. And finally, from the Community Engagement Committee, we're in the middle of Dare to Lead. So we've got, I think it's 6 people, and want to offer thanks to Jordan Debank-Lesniak, who has joined us from the Performing Arts Collaborative here in Grace Lake too. So Jess, I don't know if you have anything to add, but that's my update for CEC. Am I forgetting anything? No? Okay. That's it for me.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to share? Christy?
I know Dr. Glickman and Mr. Lewis have also, and Ms. Nash have also been working on onboarding conversations for new equity committee members, but I have mine tomorrow night, so I'm excited about that, and just wanted to give everyone an update that those are happening. And I believe our first official meeting with our new members will be in February. Is that correct, Dr. Glickman? I think? Okay, great.
Okay. Up to the superintendent.
Superintendents report. Well, first of all, it looks like we have some younger members in our audience today. Did you all just wake up today and decide you wanted to come to a board meeting, or are you earning a badge? Badge? Badge. Well, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're here, so welcome tonight. Good to see you. It is not in any way possible to convey how hard everyone is working during this unprecedented time. We know that's a phrase we keep using, right? Unprecedented time, and it keeps being true. So the teachers just managing their classes, providing lessons for students who are in isolation or quarantine, also subbing in for the many absent staff members. Some of our teachers have also jumped in to help with our quarantine tutors for quarantine students. So last week, we didn't have nearly enough quarantine tutors, so our reading specialists, many of them jumped in to help with that. This week, excuse me, some of our teachers who are at home quarantining, but who are not symptomatic or are not very symptomatic, are serving as quarantine tutors for their home. Really, the work of our teachers is just incredible. Then we have our program assistants who are also subbing into classrooms if they're qualified to do so, and subbing for each other during lunch recess duty, some of them doing period after period after period of lunchroom duty. Thank you to those program assistants. Office and health staff, there are simply no words to convey the level of pressure that they are under on a not just a daily basis, but a minute-by-minute basis. Managing the communication and the data load of the number of absent students. It's not possible to really even talk about that clearly. We're thankful to our custodial staff keeping the place clean and safe, along with our tech staff making sure that we have the tools that we continue to need. And then there are our administrators, many of whom are sitting around this table, the others at home, and I hope not watching this board meeting. I hope they're resting. They are following ever-changing guidance while being the management hub of everything that I just talked about, and still functioning as instructional leaders. And then finally, our students and families coming in, going out, making arrangements, and just living in this world that we're all sharing together right now. We just came back from winter break, and we're really, really, really tired already. We're trying to pump ourselves up, but people are tired. But it's all worth it, and I have to share with you, one teacher wrote to me just today. She didn't know she was going to be in the board meeting, but she wrote to me and wrote, "The last couple of days of work have been the kind of days that remind me of why I became a teacher." And so despite all of what I just described to you, that's how people are feeling, just pitching in and helping out, looking at the kind of faces we have sitting out there right now and knowing why they're doing it. As you know, guidance has changed in very, very slow increments, one drip at a time over the past week. And it already appears that the change from a 10-day to a 5-day exclusion from class is making a difference in our absences. And we expect those numbers to continue to improve as Omicron peaks and then goes down. And again, we have that decrease from 10 to 5-day exclusion, which really is making a difference. So we're going to look at some numbers. So Chris, I'm going to ask you to throw those slides up for me. Thank you. All right. So this first slide is about positive cases. And I want to make sure everyone knows that when we share information about positive cases, we do it on a week-by-week basis. And that's because information is coming in all the time. So doing it and having a cutoff on a week is much more accurate than doing it on a daily basis. So that's what we've been doing. So I have for you 3 different dates. The week that ended December 3rd, the week that ended December 10th, and the week that just ended, right, January 7th. And you can see back on December 3rd, we had only 50 positive cases across the district, and that and this is students and staff. So that was 1.2% of our students and staff back on December 3rd, that week. December 10th, even better, 28 positive cases across the district throughout the week, 0.7%. And now we have our first week back, the week of January 7th, 357 positive cases, about 8.9% across the district, students and staff. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because it mirrors what we're seeing in our county, what we're seeing in our state, what we're seeing in our nation, what we're seeing in the world. So nobody was surprised to see those numbers, but I did want to have them displayed, and you can see them on a chart just going up. We look forward to being able to see those in another chart sometime soon, starting to go down. Next slide, please. Okay, this is some student data from this week. This is easier to, this we can show reasonably easily on a day-by-day basis because it's about attendance. So I have for you Tuesday's date, that's the 11th, and today's date, the 12th. So this is, again, district-wide. On the 11th, we had 293 students involved in our remote learning, working with the quarantine tutors. So that was about 8.2% of our students. Now, if you look at how many students were out of the building across the district, it was 654, which is 18.2% of our students. Many of the students in that list are likely students who their families took them out because they're symptomatic, but they have not yet tested positive. They are not yet considered, they weren't yet eligible to work with the tutor. They're not in remote learning yet because they just went out. We do still have some families that are have not yet felt comfortable bringing their children into school, so some of them will be those students, but many of them are likely symptomatic students or students who are sick with other things. And you can see that already today, where we've had already, shared the news a couple of days ago that we are going to the 5-day quarantine. The numbers have already started going down. So today we are at 7.4% of our students in remote and 16% students across the district out of the buildings. So I'd like to tell you that I know it will continue to come down. I cannot predict the future. I hope that we will see them continue to go down. And we have one more slide. This one's really encouraging. This is about our staff. So I have information from last week and this week. So the 4th, that was last Tuesday, we had 80 staff members out and 37 unfilled positions. That means that when we have people who are absent, if I'm absent, for example, I don't have a sub. But if I'm a 3rd grade teacher and I'm absent, I need a sub. So we had 37 people last Tuesday who needed a sub, and we didn't have one for them. That's where people are subbing in for each other, where we're closing services down, where a program assistant is filling in. Some of them are people who are not necessarily classroom teachers, but a program that we've canceled, something like that. And by the way, the chart is the blue shows the actual absences and the red is the unfilled positions. So that number went up on Wednesday to 90 staff members absent and 44 unfilled positions. We were really concerned. Went down a little bit. The next day, 80 to 32. And then I just want to show you what happened this week. This is today. 48 staff members absent, only 11 unfilled positions. So much better. So we're very hopeful that our staff numbers will continue to go down. And I wanted our board and community to see that. So that is the information that I have to share with you regarding COVID and how we're handling school right now. There are other pieces of the superintendent report, but board, does anybody have any questions or comments about anything I just shared?
I just have one question. Do you think we have an opportunity or a need to possibly put on another vaccination clinic?
We absolutely can pull one together. We were waiting to kind of get things going this school year, and actually I just today got a reach out that I will be responding to in terms of a clinic. But I will, we're going to try to do it a different way this time, with
Okay.
a different
Yeah, 'cause,
organization,
you know,
that's all I'm going to say.
As
Yes.
we've all been seeing the stats come across the news and flashed in front of our eyes daily.
Yep.
You can see the definite pattern between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated.
Yes.
And the severity of how they get sick and hospitalizations. So, just encouraging, you know, those that have not had an opportunity to get vaccinated to go out and get vaccinated. Lake County Health Department has got open spots almost daily. And then obviously our local pharmacies are also putting out, giving COVID shots as well. So as a public health reason, if you have the opportunity and you want to, I would highly suggest to go work on getting vaccinated. So.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else, questions or comments?
Yes, thanks for
Yes.
that overview, Dr. Glickman. It brings up an immediate question that I have and then maybe a future topic. So the question that I have is around our strategy for the unfilled positions and just understanding what that looks like. And obviously to Mr. Wheatman's point, the vaccination clinic can be like one prong of a multi-prong approach to addressing that. So not sure if there's a strategy around that, but that's something that I'd like to be informed about. How do we, I mean, obviously we know there's a teacher shortage and substitute shortage, but what other creative or proactive things are that we're looking at to mitigate that even further going forward?
I'm wondering if we might be able to answer your question.
Okay.
Maybe we can try between Chris Wilk and me.
Okay.
So, I mean, we know that there is a substitute shortage across the nation. Are you asking about how we mitigate it on a day-to-day basis, because things have been very different lately, or are you asking in general, how do we get more substitutes?
So I think it's probably like a two-pronged answer, right? So there's the right now, how do we address it, but what's the longer-term strategy, recognizing that we're going to be living with this for a little while?
Sure. So, Chris, certainly you can share what we've been doing on a daily basis, and then, you know, to the extent that you can speak about long-term, certainly we know that you would have already done things if you could. But if you could share a little bit about what we do on a daily basis for these.
Sure. On a daily basis, not just over the past week, but on day in, day out, there's always a sub shortage. It's a very few and far between that we have all of our sub positions filled. On average, we'll probably this year about 50 staff members out on a daily basis from FMLAs, regular sick leave, quarantine, student services. So it really kind of depends upon the situation, but most often we're internal subbing. So we'll pull a paraprofessional who has a teaching certificate or has a bachelor's degree, because those are some of the criteria that they need in order to be able to sub per ISB. And so they might be moved from their regular role into that classroom. You know, sometimes services may have to be disrupted a little bit. Usually the principals have a rotating schedule on who they are able to pull, so that it's not just always person A and kids A that are impacted, or classroom A that's impacted. Long term, there's a sub shortage. There's been a sub shortage prior to the pandemic as well. Over the summer, the board approved to increase our sub pay. It went from $110 a day to $120 a day with a loyalty rate per se, that after a certain number of days worked, you'd be bumped up to a higher rate. It's one of the things. I'm waiting to meet, I just sent an email out today. I'll be meeting with 4 individuals next week who've reached out and said they want to sub in our district. So we're starting to see people come back to subbing. I hope that is foreshadows what we're going to see with our teaching staff. If you read the research, we're still going to be down teacher candidates because it just nobody's coming through the teacher programs. But that's, recruiting, getting local staff. So if you know somebody that is interested, most of our subs are by word of mouth. It's, somebody who may be interested, maybe they're taking some time off from their regular job, or they're stay-at-home parent, and now their child has gotten to that age where they're able to, go back to work. So just interim. So send them our way. The great thing about substitute teaching is that you get to impact lives, but you also get to set your hours. You want to work 3 days a week, you work 3 days a week. If you want to work 5 days a week, you work 5 days a week. If you have a doctor's appointment on Wednesday, then you want to work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, you're able to do it.
Okay.
So I have recruitment on our end, but also spreading the word that we're looking for people.
Sure. And that's helpful insight. I just want to ensure that we don't have classrooms that are unattended, and how can we get creative? And this is just off the top. I don't even know if this is viable, but just, recognizing the community concern around this topic, what type of partnerships do we have or can create with like Lake County CLC, where we have, student teachers, right, where they're trying to earn credits and stuff, is that a viable, pool?
Yeah, unfortunately, the state does have certain criteria that you have to have a bachelor's degree in order to be a full-fledged sub. There is a short-term sub license where you have to have 60 credit hours, and then you're very limited to the number of days that you're able to sub.
Okay.
And what's districts that have been utilizing that have seen issues with the work they're putting into, because then you have to go through this whole, a big training process as well, is that the work that they're putting in, they're not able to get those subs. They're not getting the return on their investment.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that insight. I just challenge us to continue to think creatively about how we mitigate that going forward. And then that kind of brought up another thought that really is probably more for a future conversation, but it ties in with this, which is, just looking at, I know we want in-person learning as much as possible, but how do we anticipate now having numbers coming out of winter break, some things we may need to consider for spring break? Right? We don't know what the numbers are going to be. I know some districts, after winter break, they had like a pause week. I don't know what it was called technically, but I'm going to call it like, instead of a gap year, a gap week, where they anticipated that because of the holiday travel and such, that the numbers would spike up, and rather than have the absenteeism as a result of that, they had that gap week that then allowed them for folks that if they did have symptoms or were sick, it got flushed out before school actually got restarted. So again, nothing to solve for, but just thinking around this whole thing and knowing spring break will be here before we know it. Just how do we kind of be intentional about our strategy going forward now that we have this awesome data your team pulled forward, Dr. Glickman? Thank you.
I missed the last thing that you said. What was the last sentence?
Oh, that now that we have this insightful data coming off of winter
got
break
it.
that your team pulled forward, awesome.
Yeah.
How do we then
Certainly.
use this as predictive
Yeah.
analysis to inform what we do for spring break?
Yeah,
if
certainly.
anything?
So I can share, I had a conversation with our SHIELD partners about doing what you call, I can't think of the language right now, but like an entry SHIELD testing that we could do over spring break. So we could do it right before spring break, right before spring break ends, so that people could bring their children for SHIELD testing. So that's one opportunity that we'd have. The opportunity that you're describing about taking a pause, I don't know if that will be possible anymore. I know some school districts did that on their own prior to getting this new guidance, but I'll tell you that the guidance that came just last night is very strong on not taking adaptive pauses and not planning for pauses in that way. So I'm wondering if even those school districts that did that, and I don't think there were any in this area, but throughout the state, if that will even be something that's possible. The guidance may make it impossible. But certainly we'll be looking at a screening opportunity for everybody who wants it ahead of time. Yeah, certainly. And Chris, by the way, thank you for taking Tamika's question and turning it into a recruitment opportunity. That was awesome.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Walk.
I'd be happy to. Tamika, are you looking to make some extra money? Some
Yeah.
vacation money, maybe?
All right, let's move on. Okay, so anybody else questions or comments about this information that I shared? Okay. I want to remind everyone that we're off on Monday to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and our teaching and learning department shared lesson ideas with teachers regarding how to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. And board, Jim asked me to share with all of you that he and I were in some conversation recently about kind of the steps we're taking and the timeline regarding my evaluation with you. So as you remember, we are for the first time using an electronic tool. I spent some time over winter break entering some of my own information into that tool. I don't think you have a login for it yet. When I am finished with my end of it, then I submit it, and then I understand you will all get a login. You'll be able to then access it. You'll be able to see my self-evaluation, and then each one of you individually will have the opportunity to assess in all of the different areas and also put in your own comments. So the timeline that Jim and I worked on together, knowing that the evaluation is due March 1st, is that I will complete my end of it by the end of this month, by January 28th, and then it'll come to you. Any questions about that? Okay. I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie Diaz to talk about access.
Yes, just have a quick announcement that the English learner proficiency exam starts next Tuesday, and we'll go
Hey,
until...
Stephanie, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you move the mic closer? Sorry.
Sure. Better? Sorry. It's a very brief announcement that the English learner proficiency exam begins next Tuesday, and our window will run until February 4th, but extended it officially until March 4th for any student who is in quarantine or remote, to give them an opportunity to come back and still be able to take the online assessment. And we have just under 700 students in our district who are participating in this assessment.
Can you say the number again, Stephanie?
It's just under 700. I think just under 700.
Just under 700 students taking access. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and the last piece of the superintendent's report is Adam Halpern talking about the event at Frederick School that occurred just before winter break.
Thank you, Dr. Glickman. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Hope everybody had a great holiday, good time. I know all of you have heard before what I am about to state. Not all heroes wear capes. This is especially true when you work in a school setting. These heroes, I call it, come from every aspect of a district. Over the past year and a half, I have seen it in many different ways. I started back in May, June of 2020. And went full-time July 1st, 2020. During this time, we have leapt over more obstacles, made more turns, and pulled together as a team and a family. I myself get to work with a team that has overcome a change in regime, ideas, and a pandemic, and yet they still come to work every day with a smile, knowing that what they do makes this all possible. On Tuesday, December 7th, approximately 4:25, I received a phone call from the Fire Alarm Monitoring Service that our fire system was in trouble. By the time I got back to the school 15 minutes later, the west wing of Frederick was completely flooded out due to 2 sprinkler heads. The first process was to shut the water down and call the O&M team to help start cleaning up. Within the first hour, we had half the team there, and we started cleaning up the water, along with the restoration company on their way. Over the next 3 days, the restoration company worked tirelessly to remove all the water and clear the area. On Saturday, December 11th, we had 10 people from the O&M team at Frederick assisting in cleaning all the furniture in the classrooms so that the kids could go back to in-person learning for the week before winter break. The week of December 13th was a hectic week as our timetable was very short to ensure that all material was going to be available for the completion of the 12 rooms. The 2 weeks were already shortened because of the holidays, so we needed to have all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted. There was no shortage of helping hands, from teachers to administration and the O&M, all helped with the process of clearing the rooms in anticipation of the repairs. We also had board members who offered help. Hashtag 1D46. The next 2 weeks in the district were hectic, tiring, and fulfilling. Frederick's West Wing transformed from bare concrete floors with no ceilings back to beautiful, happy, and comfortable learning spaces again. JC Restoration worked magic in getting the rooms complete in the tight time frame that I gave them. By January 3rd, our classrooms were once again filled with laughing and happy kids, talking about their vacations and times with their family. Thank you to all the contractors, staff, families, and the Board of Education for making this possible. I'm going to show you a couple pictures of a little bit, everybody saw the damage that was done. Going to give you a little bit of after pictures of where we are now. So up at top there, obviously, those were the pictures from the night that it actually happened. You can see all the water. As the work started going through and they started ripping everything out over the next couple days. Is that you pushing it? There we go with the new carpet that was installed and laid down. And I don't know if anybody can tell, but we had these old power poles that were right in the middle of the room, so it gave us a prime opportunity and time to remove them so that we had the nice big open space. Next, please. There we go with the classrooms being put back together, desks in place, getting ready for all the kids to come back. Next, please. There you see, as GSF is in the back there, I happen to have caught a perfect picture with them as they were helping clean also to make sure that everybody can get back. And last but not least, that was probably one of my favorite pictures there because it had the whole library in the background of that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. And last but not least, I know I said he was last, but Mr. Vipond has a few things to say. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Just wanted to share a brief update. Before winter break in December, we talked about the new flat panels that we would be piloting across the district. I'm excited to share that the pilot units arrived the week before, I think I said spring break, the week before winter break. We can dream, right? The week before winter break, the pilot units arrived. Our info specialists and tech team got a chance one afternoon that week to start learning, start exploring. And now, since we have been back, there's one panel very similar to this in every one of our schools. And that panel, the pilot, as we talked about in December, is a little bit different in each building. Some buildings have it in a different classroom each day, getting a bunch of different experience and a variety of opinions and feedback. And then some buildings have it in one classroom for a couple days or a few days at a time to get kind of that deeper level of feedback and experience. All of that to say that overall the feedback has been very positive. We continue to learn each day and we have spreadsheets going with different feedback and different questions that we still hope to answer. And I'm excited to show off a whole lot more about it at our next board meeting and share some more updates at that time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to go back to a question from, I don't know, maybe a half an hour ago, when somebody asked about our, I think, Christy, you asked about when our next equity committee meeting is, and Mr. Lewis, although he's not here at the table, he is watching, and he just sent me a message to correct. So thank you, Paul, that the next equity meeting is January 24th, in person, if possible. And that's the end of the superintendent report. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, so we're up to the consent agenda, so I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved?
Second.
Braden,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye. Next are action items. These are agenda items that will be voted on today at this meeting. So the first one is, I need a motion to approve the student fees, early childhood tuition, and facility rental fees for the school year 2022-2023. And as we had discussed before, these are flat. We are not raising them. We're keeping them as they are. Any questions? Okay, I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
Weedman,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Albert.
Aye.
Next, I need a motion to approve the Durham contract renewal for the 22-23 school year.
So moved?
I'll second. Any questions?
I have one. So when I was reviewing the contract, or the latest update that we received coming into to this evening, the way that it looks like there's an area in there where I guess some of the costs that there are the need to raise base rate salaries and some other costs. I'll jump back over and pull the email up to be more specific, but it sounds like it's pass-through costs, straight pass-through costs onto the district, as opposed to, I guess, what we were originally looking at. And I was just trying to understand, because I didn't think that we had that language in there before. The last paragraph, in the event market conditions dictate that employee wages are necessary, and then including adjustments for ... I'm just trying to understand, is that standard language that's been there before? And maybe I just missed it? Because we did just have the rate increase and the concession given the need to raise wages, et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm opening the contract. Are you referring to in the event market conditions dictate?
Yes.
I believe that's been in the last contracts. At least last year in the first COVID contract that was passed, that language was added.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, roll call.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
All right, next is unfinished business, and we're so good we don't have any. So we're going to go on to new board business. I had asked everybody to kind of report out on their IASB conference sessions that we attended in November. Can't believe it was in November already. So I will go first, since if I can get it up. There we go. That's it, found it. All right, so in total, I went to 5 sessions, but 3 of them were probably more beneficial than the other 2. The other 2 I kind of didn't get a whole lot out of, which is sometimes typical when we go. But the first one was effective financial transparency, which, they talk about us when we have our meetings and when we have an opportunity to tell our story to the community of where we're sitting financially, and the importance of that. It makes it a lot easier when it comes down to levy time and referendum time and passing the bonds and stuff like that. So some of their suggestions were increasing the visibility of what our budget looks like, and not only in the numbers. I mean, even when we, something that I would like to talk to Chris about in the future is when we look at our board packet, there are times where I look at the board packet and all I see is numbers. And they suggest putting in graphs and pie charts and stuff like that to give you a better idea of where they at. Because some people, much like every student in this school district learns a different way, there's board members that view things visually differently and can learn from that. Publishing stuff like our newsletters, our annual report, our FOIA information, which I know are on some of those, most of that is on our website already, but accessibility and easy to get to. With us putting together a new website coming up over the summer break, I think it gives us a great opportunity to upgrade our transparency in our financial situation with the community at that point. Obviously, doing anything too much right now would probably be duplication of effort. But going forward, I'd like to see us work towards that. Second one was trends in collective bargaining. I usually go to some sort of collective bargaining session when I'm there because there's always something to learn in there. And looking back, as I was looking at my notes, and as we had gone through the interest-based bargaining, I know I missed parts of it, but going through the PowerPoint slides that she provided, a lot of what was talked about in the topics of or trends in collective bargaining were kind of covered in our interest-based bargaining. Communication is the key, honest, open communication with from both sides. Make sure we're following the Illinois Labor Relations Act. Being prepared to explain or tell our story of why and our rationale behind our proposals, and not just putting out a number, but telling them why and where we're sitting. Keeping it on a professional level, no personal attacks, was the other topic that came out of there. And then clear, concise language so that there's no ambiguity and there's no going back and forth, well, what did this really mean? The language needs to be pretty clear what is desired. The other one I went to was a legal review. They called it Can't Make It Up. They talked about political speech in schools and how you can't necessarily ban all political speech in schools. They talked about the impact of COVID on teachers and students, which, as a lot of our meetings nowadays kind of touch on that. They also went over critical race theory and how that is looking to heat up and how it'll be probably in discussions for many years. And then they talked about the impacts of the universal pre-K bill that I think it was passed, but it might have been just proposed, and the financial impact on the school district. And just to give you an example for that, it was an $18 billion bill. For the first 3 years, it would cover the students' cost at 100% by federal, 0 by state. Then we go, fourth year go down to 90, fifth year go to 75, sixth year 60%, seventh year you're all on your own. So it wasn't a bill that was going to be providing financials all the way into the future. So that would be something that we would have to then look at funding on our end as we go forward. Now it's down the road, but that's part of what they were talking about. So those are just kind of the highlights. My biggest one I'd like to work on once we get to that new website getting up and running is the financial transparency part. So that's what I had. Would you like to go?
All right.
All right. I think, Mr. Vipond, I think you got mine right. That's right, yep. So similarly, I was able to attend 5 sessions as well, and highlighted a couple of the big ones that, or a couple of items from the ones that stuck out to me the most. One of them, the first session, was the integrating new technology to promote learning in a pandemic. And the topic obviously focused on, the major challenges that the pandemic caused within access to technology in our communities, and the discussion around that. And I've highlighted in yellow the things that stuck out to me the most to make it a little bit easier to look at. But the ways in which we try to access learning for our staff and our faculty, and potentially for best practices within the community. And the interesting takeaway from this particular session was looking at ways in which professional development and learning can morph into more of a conference-type atmosphere rather than a series of meetings on institute days specifically for teachers. And I experienced that myself, in the school where where we're dismissed to our PLCs and we simply just, sit in a room and talk about things. And this particular session was, how do we, it kind of comes back to some of the things I've talked about a lot before, how do we do education differently in all the different ways? And it was fascinating that this particular session had a couple of ideas in that respect. The second session that I went to was continuous inquiry, cycles of inquiry. I think we've talked about that a lot as a board over the years. And the large takeaway I took from that, highlighted at the top there, was that continuous improvement process that we all experience and we try to integrate into our work as a board. And I didn't look at it this way before, but this was a very enlightening comment that one of the presenters made, that allows us to communicate in a way that captures multiple moments of an academic year, both for students, family, and staff, rather than it being at moments where we receive a report or an initiative, right? It's like a constant frame-by-frame understanding of how the year works through those cycles of inquiry. And so they recommended that you ask yourself questions about, what questions do we need to ask? How do we expect to answer those questions? And this ties into the stories that Jim shared with his session. What narratives do we want to share in that process? How do we want to frame our story? And I think we've talked about that a lot as a board many times as well. So that was very positive. And you would think that I would have more to say about the positive pathways for students with disabilities. That was a program available through multiple school districts in the state of Illinois. And so I'm going to be bringing that to some of my conversations with CEDAL. The big one is the next one, and I also hyperlinked the actual presentation to this link that I sent in the email to you all. It's 60 slides, so it's a big presentation, but it's got a ton of great information in there. And it talked, the title of the session was From Virtual Distortion to Rebuilding Real-Time Connections. And they opened with, prior to the pandemic, and this was even before COVID hit, the average teen would spend about 30% of their year on the screen for entertainment. And that was prior to the pandemic. And that multiplied with the pandemic. And so some of the things, of course, naturally, that we know that they see are, that potentially are exposed to are, social media challenges, which happened very recently, misinformation, pornography, exploitation, all the, drug and hate and harassment. And so this was a really impactful session because we talk about building resilience. And so if you see the highlighted part there on the sheet, we talk about building resilience, but they had some recommendations or some new ways of framing it. And the two that are on that list that hit me the most were cultivating optimism and nurturing relationships. The cultivating optimism is the one that sticks out most to me because we also hear conversations about toxic optimism, for lack of a better, too much optimism, I guess. And the way that this particular panel described it was a way of acknowledging the trauma, by allowing that trauma to help that student or that staff member or that family build pathways to optimism without simply dismissing it and saying, well, you really should just be positive about it. And that was very, very impactful. And they asked the question as well, how can we do education differently? I would have gone back and listened to this one a second time. And the final item that's highlighted on there that I took away from this that I would love for us to discuss at another time is they paired up every board member with a teacher and a student throughout an entire academic year so that board member could schedule time to come into a classroom and visit the teacher and visit with the student and develop a relationship over the course of an academic year. And I think that would be an incredible opportunity for our board to be able to be involved and be able to be, go into a classroom, participate, get to know students, get to know teachers. I think that would feed into our, into the things we talk about with our interest-based bargaining and give us a whole new view. Those of us who are teachers get a different view. Those of us who are not teachers would be able to experience that as well. So that was, I would like to go back and see that session again. So, and that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christy Braden?
Mr. Vipond, I threw mine over to you in email if you want to throw it up. It's just a Word document like Stevens. But yeah, so I was the delegate for our delegate assembly, which ended up taking most of my day. Because there were some technology issues, it was the first time that I guess they were using electronic voting. So there was about 90 minutes of fun. Everyone, first of all, they tried to get the technology up and running and then tried to educate 400 people on how to use it correctly. So, but it was great. It was really interesting. And so I wanted to just give everyone an update on where everything landed. The first thing that I learned was that there were several items. The first thing that they do is actually put a bunch of the ones that they think are going to pass on a consent agenda. So there is, in fact, a consent agenda. So there were, and then what they do is they ask, does anyone want to pull anything off the consent agenda for debate, just like we would, because they use parliamentary procedure just like we do. So I listed here, and I know that's really small, but there ended up being 7 items that did pass through the consent agenda. Those are all items we supported. There were a few that got pulled off that I'll talk about in a minute. The other interesting thing I learned, and I think it's a learning for us for next year, is that if the committee did not recommend supporting a resolution and no one filed an appeal before this session, it was not considered. So there were 6 items that were just not considered that we actually voted on, but that were not considered. The science of reading curriculum, the school code review, the school board member compensation, the federal funding for the clean energy in the school buses, and then the child-safe gun storage. So one of the things I noted for us next year is if there is a resolution that's not being recommended by the committee, another discussion that we'll need to have is, do we want to appeal that and bring it into the room and have them vote on whether or not they want to vote on it? This is very parliamentary. It's very interesting. But so it's just, there were a couple I think we probably would have wanted to put on the table because we were very in support of the resolutions around the federal funding for some of the infrastructure and the clean school buses. So just something for us to think about next time. And then everything else, I'll just go over the kind of the ones that didn't go the way that we wanted them to go. Most of them, that we supported did pass. The child care reimbursement did not pass. I thought that was really interesting and kind of a shame. I know this board was very interested in having that supported, mostly because they felt it was an unfunded mandate, and so where would you come up with that money, which I understand, don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand. The pre-service licensure did pass. I know that's something we talked about with Mr. Lewis about the fact that, we didn't necessarily think that that was a solution to the problem. And the other thing that was brought up in opposition was it's a test, and so that benefits somebody, and that somebody is a testing company. However, it still passed. That was interesting. And then the student safety and protection plan failed. And interesting thing about that is the committee has recommended it 3 years in a row, and it's failed 3 years in a row. Of course, that was the most heated debate, but it did end up failing. And then the health and sex education curriculum also failed. So those were the two that I think were probably the most heated. So the two things that I think takeaways for us is, first, do we want to propose any resolutions next year? So be thinking about that. I think that's something we should come back to, maybe over I'll have to look at the timing, but just, is there anything that we want to put on the table? And then next year, making sure that if there are some that the committee is not recommending, but that we would like to see debated and come up for a vote, that we could file an appeal and then see that come into the room for discussion and a vote. So it was great, and appreciated the the ability to be a part of it for sure. It was really interesting discussion and debate, and just kind of got me keyed into like what's on school board minds across the state. And then the other, I had like Jim, a couple that were, it's funny. I went to this federal update. And what I wrote here is that there's not much that Chris Wildman hasn't already educated us about. I feel like Mr. Wildman's done such a good job of educating us about the funding that is available and how we can use it, that I was like, yeah, So thank you, Mr. Wildman. And then I just wanted to mention the Anthony Jack keynote. I thought that was a great session. And he talked a lot about, as a first-generation college student, he got into a prestigious school. It might have been Princeton, Harvard, Ivy League. But what he found was, even though he had access to that education, he did not know the language. There was a hidden curriculum that he did not understand. He didn't understand, because he was a first-generation college student, that he was supposed to go to office hours, and that, those kinds of, he called it a hidden curriculum. And so I wrote, the question I had for us was, what is the hidden curriculum at the K-8 level? So just because we're giving kids access, do they understand how to go to school and how to make the most out of the resources that they have? As a first-generation college student, I experienced that too. I didn't know how to go to college. I had to teach myself. And so, do we have kids that are kind of having to teach themselves how to do school? And how can we help kids who may not have that language already? How can we help students decode the language of education, and where are we assuming that access equals inclusion? So I thought it was a great session, and really had me thinking about this idea of just because we put it out there doesn't mean that students know how to take advantage of it. So that's me.
Okay, thank you. I'll just keep going around the table. Jason?
Sure. I don't have any visual aids for you, sorry. Christy, on that general session, I had the same note for Anthony Jack's session. The catchphrase or catchy phrase was accessing inclusion, and I noted the same example he gave because I didn't know what he meant at first. And that's probably my privilege speaking, right? I knew about office hours. I had them in high school. It never occurred to me that someone wouldn't know. So yeah, the hidden curriculum, that was a very powerful thing to hear. I also attended the session on the legal review that Jim did. I won't recap it in gory detail, but the main takeaway I got from that session was a warning to the board members in the audience that the culture wars are coming to you. There are well-funded groups who are kind of winding up agitators and pointing them in your direction is basically the message I got. On CRT in particular, I thought it was very interesting. One panelist mentioned, and I appreciated this, he said CRT is a college-level framework that is not synonymous with culturally responsive educational practices. And to paraphrase him, he said, rest assured, CRT is not being taught in any of your schools. So I thought it was great that he was very clear about that. And
Jason, I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said? CRT is not being taught where?
in your schools.
In your school, okay, thank you.
Yes. And I got to tell you, I went to a session that I wish I wouldn't have gone to. It was on the pension problem. It was grim, to be sure. The panel went into the reasons for the situation that we're in, basically politicians shorting the pension obligations over various reasons. So convenient, politically expedient reasons. They had pension holidays that they decided not to make the payments that were required to keep the pension healthy. They talked about the Edgar ramp of 1994, where they set a goal of 90% funding level by 2045, and then put forth a schedule to pay into the pension system that had almost no contributions in the first 15 years. And basically, it was just a giant kicking the can down the road and someone else's problem to deal with. So I left that one pretty desolate, I have to tell you. And those were the highlights of the Triple I sessions for me. Thanks.
Okay. Jessica?
So being such a new board member, I really appreciated being able to go to this conference. I'm really glad the timing worked out the way it did, because I learned so much. It was a very valuable experience. And I wanted to quickly thank Christy Miller and Tamika, because I had reached out to them recently asking, how do we do these board reports? So thank you both. And then, so the three sessions that I got more takeaways from are Every Voice Matters, Engaging Those We Serve. And it makes me want to explore a public participation spectrum that I think someone has shared with me before, either Christy Miller or Stephen Mack from the Community Engagement Committee. Involving and collaborating with the public, telling the public how we're using their voice, and seeking student voice were all big takeaways for me. And that civic engagement is different from public relations, that we want actual civic engagement, not a one-way push of information. And that civic engagement takes work time and intentional conversation. The second session that I learned a lot from was the navigating municipal zoning processes. And I have a great appreciation for the complexities and the patience and the time that it must have taken to do the solar panel projects. Now that I've been made aware of how many different sanitation districts and municipal districts there are that can affect those complex projects. And so a key takeaway for me was being aware of involving the different people in those discussions, not just when you need approval for something, like not going to the village and saying we need to approve, we would like this to be approved, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. The next one, I did share the slides for the electric school buses and Future Green's Bus to Grid initiative. I shared the slides back in December. One of the things that most intrigued me was the bidirectional charging that could make buses an asset and store energy that could also put energy back into the grid. And it was something that I hope Durham and other bus companies think about for the future. And keeping in mind the voice of students and community members who care about sustainability, it got me thinking, what if our solar panel arrays could charge buses and eliminate the costs, not only economic costs, but health costs and pollution costs of diesel? And then what if Durham in the future thinks of itself as a transportation company, not just as a bus company, but they could maybe lead biking groups and walking school buses in addition to traditional buses. Just an idea. And then I wanted to make sure that Durham is aware of all these resources through the EPA, the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and then a variety of different funds, including the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Fund. According to the contacts, there's a lot of funding coming down the pipeline, potentially $5 billion over 5 years nationally. And then I had
gone to a few other sessions and had some similar highlights from the Anthony Jack session, pretty much the same takeaways. And the unconscious bias in education was important to go to as well, and I appreciate that the Equity Committee is meeting with focus groups and having these conversations. And sorry, I think I went a little over, but.
I didn't know I set a timeline. You're good. Ms. Nash?
So due to illness, I wasn't able to attend III this year, but I've been taking copious notes, and I would like to share a few thoughts thus far, Mr. Wheatman. First, thank you again to Christy Braden, who you served as an awesome delegate for our district. So thank you so much for the robust, well, one, for your patience during the tech challenges, and then just for your copious notes and recommendations back to the board. Great job. Another thing, another board member, so Dr. Mack, reviewing your presentation, I think Ms. Braden also referenced Anthony Jacks. It sounds like that was something to behold, and I missed. But one of the things that you guys, the themes that I heard coming out of there around access and inclusion and hidden curriculum in K-8, I'm just wondering if we have the opportunity to lean on either or both of you or any one of the board members that attended that session to perhaps give a presentation to our equity committee at our next meeting. So I know Dr. Lewis is watching. So if we, have a space for an agenda line in a future meeting, I think that would be valuable for our equity and inclusion committee to hear. Jason, I found it very insightful around, kind of, hey, boards, get ready. The critical race theory fight is coming to your doors. And so I know we've talked as a board on occasion about how do we get in front of this and start framing the conversation. Not only about that, but it just fits into our overall strategic goals around creating a narrative, right? We've talked about that as a board for some time, making sure that we're creating the right framing and narrative and communication for our community. So perhaps sooner than later, that's something that we can just start to take a deep dive on. I know many of us have different, thoughts, and maybe we can have a session to dive deeper into that. And then Ms. Albert, oh my. So kudos to you for absorbing so much information, just as you were sworn in. It kind of feels synonymous to me in 2019. The timing was awesome. So I'm glad that you had the opportunity to go and take advantage of III. It is amazing. And I haven't heard from Mrs. Miller, but I'm sure it will be outstanding. Mr. Weedman, I yield my time.
Again, I didn't set any time. Ms. Miller?
Yeah. Okay, so I split my takeaways into 3 themes, and the first one is sustainability. And when I think about sustainability, I'm thinking about 3 things. And the first is economic impact, social impact, and then environmental impact. So while I did not attend the Huntley District 158's presentation this year, I did attend it in 2019. And I liked what the headline on their presentation, which said, "We must divert every dollar we can from building to learning." And as they explained all the different things that they were doing, I felt some recognition, knowing that they talked about building envelope, and I know that that's what we're doing too. So it made me very hopeful economically and environmentally that Huntley, after their improvements, they spend less than 92% of districts of all kinds in the Chicago area as a result of their sustainability efforts. So that was impressive in 2019. This year, I attended the Sustainability Academy and was pleased to listen to the River Trails School District 26's CSBO. Her name is Lyndall Schuster, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, and she shared a case study and looked at the economic, the health and wellness, and social impacts of outdoor learning environments, specifically around and something that I hadn't thought of and wasn't aware of, that when we have playgrounds that have large open spaces and just playground equipment, that really privileges a certain type of student, as opposed to playgrounds that have small conversation spaces, natural spaces, different types of natural areas those playgrounds are actually more conducive to kids' social learning. So something I thought we might want to think about. Another session during that Sustainability Academy was also River Trails, and they made some building improvements, which I thought were really clever, just by painting things like a solar system on the floors, an electron shell was painted. Jess, I know you'll like that there was a Fibonacci spiral, and that was all part of just the flooring, and it had just been painted on. So my understanding is that wasn't cost prohibitive. And then they had energy dashboards available to the students so that the students could see how much energy each classroom was using, and they could then be encouraged to help lower the score of whatever their classroom's usage was. So I thought that was interesting. And I was shocked and so proud when I realized that District 127, Mike Zellick was supposed to be one of the speakers. He was not there because he was sick, but he had his presentation materials available, and lo and behold, our district came up. And so I saw our solar arrays, and we were held up as an example to other districts of how to really be resourceful in generating steady, stable sources of revenue for districts. So that was kind of fun to see that. And he talked, or in his slide, there was mention of Senate Bill 2408, which is the energy bill. I believe Melinda Bush, Christy, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Melinda Bush was a co-sponsor for that, and it says that Illinois will be 100% carbon-free in 30 years. And there is a lot of federal and state money available right now for solar panels and other improvements. Given that our district has saved, again, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but $1.8 million as of August 2021, as a combination of energy savings, solar recs, and that, I was very proud. And 127 has saved the same taxpayers $9.8 million, or will, over the next 25 years. So again, I was just very proud to see our community being held up as an example. So that was sustainability, and I got a lot out of that. That was all day Friday, several sessions on that. And then I attended some other sessions. The most interesting one for me the next day was on bond issuance. And I learned about some resources that could help us monitor the secondary bond market, which I'm not at all familiar with or wasn't before. So I was able to read a little bit more about that. I shared some of those articles with you by email, but learned about flipping bonds, which is, again, in the secondary bond market, and something we might want to monitor just so that we're well informed in 2 years or at any time. And then learned the difference between competitive and negotiated sale bonds, and also the roles of municipal advisors and underwriters and how they're different, and who has fiduciary responsibility to the district and the taxpayer, and who has different duties of care. So just want to make sure that we're very thoughtful on the Finance Committee, especially about making sure our wonderful CSBO Assistant Superintendent of Finance has all the resources that he needs as we move forward in the next 2 years. And the last was monitoring. This session I wanted to go to, but I couldn't because it overlapped, but I did read through the materials that we were provided and looked at their suggestions for having an annual schedule of policy reviews so that we look at a specific set of policies and as a whole board really consider, is this policy doing what we wanted? Are we getting the results we wanted? I know at one of our past meetings we talked about transportation, and that the interests that we're interested in pursuing or in providing for our community is a safe, equitable, timely, cost-effective access to schools. And I wondered maybe if we would want to develop a schedule so that we know what's coming, have time to prepare for it, and really take a look at what results do we want from our policies, and how do we know whether we're reaching them, and what are we doing about it as a district. And then another idea might be procurement policies as we think about sustainability and supply chain and environmental justice. Maybe I think it would be a good idea for us to start thinking about what kind of direction do we want to set for our district, given that we're going to ask our taxpayers to approve another referendum. So what do we want to make visible that maybe isn't visible? And we could do that through a monitoring process with our policies. So those were the highlights for me.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So that covers all those for us. The next is topics for future agenda items.
Oops, yep. We will, on February 2nd, have cybersecurity results of an RFP. We should be bringing you an IGA, intergovernmental agreement for Grace Lake Park District. We expect to have a draft of the calendar for you to look at, the 2022-2023 calendar. Mr. Vipon, excuse me, will be coming with a more formal proposal about the flat panels. You keep hearing about it. You're going to actually get a proposal next. And finally, we will be bringing you a recommendation for a new assistant superintendent for teaching and learning.
Okay. Do you have a question? Comment?
Just one, we've made some great suggestions, and I like Mr. Mack's label for continuous improvement. And we've talked about what we learned. I'm wondering what the next steps are. Who's doing what by when, and how are we going to follow up? I don't know what the next steps could be other than a special meeting or a working group, perhaps, or maybe even agenda items for our committees, but just wanting to make sure that we don't lose all the good learning that we've had at our conference.
Good question. How do you think we should handle that, Dr. Klickman? I'm just trying to think. Thoughts? Anyone?
Maybe we think about it between now and our next meeting, and it's just a new business or a discussion item.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, because a lot will depend on what we're trying to bring forward and move forward with. Okay. So you want us to put it on in a meeting or two of just a general discussion of how to move forward?
That's my personal opinion. If the rest of us want to do that, I think it would be a good idea to think through.
Anybody opposed to that or have a different idea on what would you like to do?
Could you restate the question? Was it about what we learned at III and taking the next step on that? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, just what actionable steps are we going to take next? And again, it doesn't have to be a big spectacular production. I don't mean that, but just.
Yeah, I don't know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I think of those sessions as something that edify us as board members to help us do our day-to-day better, but it does certainly have applicability to certain projects or, overarching themes or so I have no objection to what you talked about.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would love to see a conversation about them, and specifically how some of the ideas that were shared tonight fit into our strategic plan. I know now we get, with the reports that we get from the administration and so on and so forth, usually it says, this particular project speaks to this particular strategic plan number, piece, whatever. And to Jason's point, it's partial edification to go to that conference, but are there pieces that we can just consider as a board going forward that fit into the guidance that we set in that strategic plan? So I think that would be a really fascinating conversation. I'd like to reflect on it, what I learned tonight.
I agree.
Okay. So we'll work on something like that probably in the February. Will that work? We got a lot of work on this. Oh, we got a lot of work to do for February too, so.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm open.
You got that?
So for the second board meeting?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have anything to add to future that we want to have on the radar? Okay. Public comments? No. We do have a quick closed session meeting tonight, so I need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
and Braden.
Aye.
And we will not be coming out, we'll be coming out of,
Never.
we'll be coming out of closed session, but we will not be having any voting, we're not going to vote or have any other discussion after the closed session, so we'll just be adjourning right away. And I'm going to really learn how to talk. Have a good night.